right, guys, we are back in the New Lab Beta podcast room. We've got with me Richard Trigilgis, Chris Delp, and this podcast is brought to you by the amazing Mr. Brown Coffee, now a phenomenon at Free Play Arcade. We also want to welcome guests from Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Apple, TuneFM, and basically anywhere else you can find a podcast. We're now listed and growing as fast as we can. We're here today. We're going to talk a little bit about our new Denton location, do a quick little update there because it has now become a whole thing. 7 months ago, we did a announcing Denton podcast. We thought we were going to open in 3 months at that time. We did not open in 3 months. We had some normal standard delays. We had a refrigeration unit that had an extra part on the roof that had to be removed, which caused a few week delay. Cranes, rain, all sorts of silly stuff. But that's standard. That happens in most builds. You're going to run into some problems that you don't anticipate. And then we did beta tests at Denton probably 2 or 3 weeks ago now.
Beta tests went really well. I mean, we had a lot of people out, played our games, loved really the concept of what we're doing. Between night 1 and night 2, we got our light fixtures changed out.
Right, yeah, we were basically ready to open. Some things to still polish, but we were ready to get people in there to have the free play experience.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, we hit a pretty huge snag with the TABC. So for those of you not in Texas, the TABC is the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. They control everything that has to do with alcohol in Texas. And it is a pretty severe and serious system of regulations. And we have filed for the permit in January 26th or something of 2018, filed for the permit. Everything was going normally. We satisfied all of the special things. This is a growler bar instead of our normal restaurant liquor setup. So we had to do a special bond, all sorts of little tiny things that were different. Those were all knocked out. So what happened is someone who owns a fractional share of St. Arnold's Brewing also happens to own, purportedly was listed on the papers of the ownership for the building that our new Denton location is in. Why this matters is kind of needs a minor history lesson.
Oh boy.
So back in 1917 or something, it's seriously that old. It's 100 years old. The state of Texas thought, hey, alcohol is kind of bad, and I don't know, prohibition, all that stuff, whatever. They established a 3-tier system of alcohol control in the state of Texas. At the tier 1, that's your producer. That's the breweries or the distilleries or the wineries or whatever cideries that make the alcohol. At tier 2 are the people that take it places, distributors. The big ones that most people that have any kind of familiarity with alcohol service in at least the state of Texas is Andrews and Benny Keith. Those are the big ones in the state. And then there's actually quite a few small ones.
Oh, tons of them.
Especially because how this tier system works, you cannot cross tiers. So a brewery cannot go to tier 3, which is the retailers, the places that you can actually buy alcohol from. A brewery cannot directly sell products to a restaurant. Now, there's some serious nuances to this law, and in the last 10 years, brew pubs, which are just breweries that are small at this point in the state of Texas, can sell directly to retailers. And once you get to a certain size, then you're no longer allowed. Mm-hmm. If this sounds dumb, it's because it's totally dumb.
Is this typical?
It's not uncommon. It's not unheard of, but most states have worked their way past this, especially with the craft brewing kind of explosion of the last decade. They've very quickly said, man, we want to support these small craft breweries. And especially once they're a success, we don't want them to be hampered by having to go through that distribution tier. Mm-hmm. So that's
the one that does confuse me the most. Is
right. So you want to hear something really crazy, because
as someone who doesn't drink, who works at a bar, I do actually want to hear something really crazy about this.
So a big brewery that is no longer qualifies as one of those brew pubs in the state of Texas, that qualifies as an actual brewery, can have a tap room. But the way they get their beer, they have to send it to the distributor, pay the distributor the retail distribution price that they charge everyone else, and then they can sell it at their tap room as a retailer. They still have to go through the tiers. So they seriously will keg the beer, give it to their distributor. Their distributor will stamp it, give it back to them, Boom. The distributor just gets raw profit.
Do they even have to take it off-site for that transaction?
No, they don't even have to take it off-site. They just have to, like, it's seriously like a stamp. They just log it in their book, put a stamp on it, and they're done. That's how insane the system is, and the TABC is very, very strict about it. I mean, it is the law, and that is how the law is written, and it's their job to enforce the law. So we're not like criticizing. It's the law we're mad at, not the actual organization. So what this means in practice with this 3-tier system of producers, distributors, and retailers, and never being so a retailer can only talk to a distributor can only talk to a brewery, and you have to always go through those tiers and follow it, except for those exceptions we mentioned earlier. So Free Play Denton, retailer. St. Arnold's Brewing is a producer. So here is the TABC's interpretation of the law, which may be correct, may not be. I am an attorney, but it doesn't really matter how much I want to fight the TABC on this, because their interpretation of the law is however the law is.
They're the regulating authority, so whatever they say goes.
So they say no one is allowed to own a fractional share of a building that would receive rent from a retailer of alcoholic products that also happens to own any shares of a producer. I know, it's complicated, it's hard, it's difficult to follow.
The implications of that statement are scary.
Well, and so what the reality is, the TABC normally doesn't catch this. There are tons of very wealthy people who own
everything,
parts of breweries and buildings that lease for all sorts of things. And it's kind of sad to think about, like, a small brewery in a downtown location that opened and bought, say a small office building or a small warehousing place, and they had extra square footage, could never lease it to a restaurant, could never lease it to, you couldn't have a Chipotle next to a brewery if the brewery happened to own the real estate, even though they're not connected. The brewery's not going to do anything. And
even if they don't carry the same products.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, so in this situation, a lot of people heard, hey, someone owns part of St. Arnold's who may actually own part of our building in Denton. That would mean any liquor license issued for that building is completely void, if that was the case. And we'll get to it in a second. Turns out this guy doesn't actually even own part of the building, which is a whole nother frustration of ours. But the implications of the law are, we can't even just tell the TVC, we will never carry St. Arnold's products. Like, that seems easy enough, right?
Well, right. That would make sense from a logical perspective.
Right. Then there's no way he could ever exercise control. Even if, we've never met this guy. I've spoken to him on the phone once at this point, because I was like, what is happening here? Because the TABC was just like, hey, there is a unavoidable conflict. You will never get a liquor license. That's the communication we had the day after our first beta test. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, this is serious. We gotta start working on it. We've been working on it daily since, to try to figure out what the TABC wants, all of that stuff. But so yes, we could not say we're not selling any St. Arnold's products. That doesn't satisfy it. It doesn't matter. That conflict, no matter how small, eliminates any liquor license. And yeah, it has a ton of implications for all of those wealthy people out there who have partial ownerships and partial corporations that own something like a building that also
might not even know.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's certainly conceivable that there's a guy out there who's just an investor.
I don't know what I have invested in. I have a 401k.
Right. Who happens to have money in a couple different things that would cause this conflict.
Right. And ultimately, there are some pretty severe penalties for breaching the system, aren't there?
Right. So the minimum punishment of if you knowingly obtain a void or invalid permit that has an illegal conflict is 6 months forfeiture of your license, even if you clear the conflict, and potentially forfeiture of any liquor license you hold. So for Free Play, that means if we got this liquor license knowing that this guy might own part of the building, they could potentially shut down Arlington and Richardson just because we violated the law. So a lot of people think this isn't very serious when they read about it on the internet because it seems really silly. But it's a totally very big legal restriction that we have to be very careful of. And so that is, right now Denton is not open. We still don't have a TABC license. And we have found out that the guy doesn't actually even own part of the building. He just happens to be an investor that sometimes owns part of the buildings that this investment company buys. So he's not actually on this one, but they had filed paperwork that suggested he might be at some point. that was enough to trigger this massive thing, and it is totally trivial. This guy was never going to exercise control, and why the 3-tier system exists is very questionable. And I have friends at distributors, but geez, those distributors are very powerful in the legislature, and they do a lot of lobbying, which distributors do provide services. Right. We would never say that. It's just, it causes these really silly situations that should probably be avoided, such as a brewery having to buy their own beer from a distributor to sell, or this conflict thing that doesn't actually affect anything.
I think, like most things that seem silly to us now, a lot of these regulations were put into place for a different period of time when the circumstances were different. And as things have changed, I mean, now we are in an age of microbreweries. It just seems silly to us. But ultimately, the full recap on this is basically just that there is no actual ownership conflict between our Denton location and what we are, and the 3-tier system. So we should be on track and should be scheduled to get our permits approved. Right now, it's just we're playing the waiting game.
So yeah, so various things have been filed and submitted to the state, to the TABC, to try to make sure that they were satisfied that this conflict was not a real conflict. I've been saying basically every single week we're about to get our liquor license and open. I still feel that way this week, but we're gonna have to wait and see.
It's only been like 2 months,
right? Yeah, it's just really gotten away from us, and it seems silly. And we had an article come out in like the Denton Record Chronicle, which was the funniest thing. I mean, the article was fine, but they had found a bunch of archive photos of kids playing pinball at Free Play, like a true 3 p.m. photo shoot on a like Saturday or something at a Free Play location. And so it says like Free Play Denton still trying to get their liquor license, and then there's like 3 kids playing pinball, and everyone that was commenting on it was like really harsh. They were like, "Man, is this just some sort of like kiddie arcade that's trying to get kids to drink alcohol?" And it was just because all these photos were really silly. But I mean, and we tried to, play it off. We're like, parents have to drink beer too. Parents need it more than anyone else and stuff like that. But it was like, it was pretty funny. And I don't think people really understand because, if I hear someone doesn't have their liquor license, the first thing I think is they don't really have their act together. They haven't figured out how to. This is just a totally weird, absurd situation that has taken too long. But the whole time we've been kind of just trying to get the other people, the TABC and our landlords, to work together to get this solved, because it has nothing to do with us at the end of the day. It just prevents us from getting a liquor license. So that's kind of the status. Some people have asked, why don't you just open Denton anyways? We have a CO. We can have people come in. And it's really irritating because they think that because we won't open without a liquor license, that somehow we need the alcohol to survive. And
that's not really the case at all. So there's a valid argument here, and we can understand why people are curious, why we don't just open and let people come play games. We know you're excited. We know that you want to come out and experience Free Play. But a big part of that experience of Free Play is being able to drink a cold beer while you're playing classic games. And it's like going anywhere. If you walked into any store and they were missing their music or their artwork or their environment, then the vibe would just be off. And I don't know. I don't think it would be right to provide that kind of environment to people.
I can speak as a former customer who never drank. And I remember coming to the original Free Play Richardson beta test, and the only thing that felt off about that was there was no music. I remember commenting to you at the time, like, wow, this is just an 80s arcade straight out of the 80s, except, there's no music. And you're like, funny you should mention that we're installing sound systems right now.
Right.
But, a part of that experience is absolutely, like, you have the best 80s arcade games, original original like equipment. Every little bit of it is like legit 80s. You have the 80s music playing in the background. You have the 80s inspired like signage. You have, I don't even know how many sodas, like the it's not Dublin Dr. Pepper, whatever it is called.
Now it's basically just real sugar Dr. Pepper.
Fair enough. But you have a ton of different sodas that any soda lover would love. Which was me coming into Free Play, even though I don't drink them now. You have the craft beers. Was it over 150, something like that? I've heard the number thrown around.
It depends on the day. But yeah, we have more than 100 at all times. And, if you consider our cellarage and all of that stuff, we've got like 200 on site at most locations.
But essentially, we are classic arcade game nerds. We are soda nerds. We are beer nerds. We care about this stuff.
Right.
Even though I don't drink it, I do care that like this attention of detail is always a part of the free play experience. And my friends who go there love it and tell me all the time about how great the beer selection is there. Mm-hmm. That's just part and parcel to it.
It's the experience, and that's a lot of people have and open retro arcades or considered it, or there's all sorts of different arcade options out there, and it would be a total disservice to have your first experience of free play not have the complete product, because we are good at everything we do, and we're really, really good at a lot of things, and it's really important to us that you show up and you get it all. That first time, it's just, that's how it is. And we don't want to open halfway. We don't want to have you come in and say, man, this would be really great if I could get a cold beer, or this would be really great if X. We want to make sure we're giving you everything we're going to give you so that you know that that is what we do. And it is a kind of a compilation of everything we've learned opening 2 other locations. We know that first impression is really important, and we want to come correct, right? We want to be fully up and running before we have them. I mean, we have beta tests, but they know it's a beta test.
Well, right. A beta test, the purpose of that is to test our games, to make sure that everything is public ready. And it's a really great thing for us because it gives us the feedback and the time to fix a lot of things that we might not have noticed, even though we spend a lot of time in our warehouse and on site working on these games to make sure that they're perfect before we open. We're going to miss a lot of things, and we need the public's help for it.
So I have the TVC website up because I was looking. I want to just read really quick how kind of crazy things can get. So this is just on a list of questions on the inter-tier relationship. This is the relationship between a distributor and a retailer.
Okay.
Can a distributor clean an area of a cold box on a retailer's floor where he or she is going to place their product or build a display? The answer is yes, but the distributor cannot remove or touch a competitor's product in order to clean the area. So like this doesn't really apply to us because our distributors, we handle all of our stocking and right. our shelf space, but that's how nuanced the TAVC law gets. They can come in there and clean off a shelf, but if they touch their competitor's product in doing it, they have violated TAVC law and they're in trouble. I mean, and they actually have to list that specific scenario. It's crazy. I mean, it's tough, and it's something we take very seriously.
It sounds like a lot of rules and regulations, and again, I'm sure that was put into place for a reason. You know, you had a distributor coming in and offsetting their competitors' products and just defacing and leaving them facing backwards, and
distributors cleaning the entire restaurant of places that they're trying to get all of the. I mean, you can see potential conflicts, but I can assure y'all in the real world that we're currently operating in, this stuff is not like things that come up. The distributors are perfectly well behaved. Everyone is just trying to, at this point, have a good beer, trying to get good beer to good people.
Well, and as far as our establishment goes, our distributors drop off our products and then our employees stock them. Yeah, and we're good to go.
We tend to do a lot of things in-house that other places don't, because we're kind of perfectionists. It shows in the product, but yeah. So anyways, that's the Denton kind of update right now. We have all of our games that are ready to open Denton.
Oh, they're beautiful.
We've got a lot of awesome things ready, and we would love to get it open, and we will get it open as soon as possible. Once we have this TAVC hiccup fixed, once the TAVC recognizes that someone who might own part of St. Arnold's Brewery does not own part of our building.
It will be very nice once we can get that beautiful new tap system that's in there filled with beer.
Yeah, so that's kind of it. Let's talk about that really quick. We're about to open an arcade that has 52 taps.
Which is...
I'm not aware of any arcade that's anywhere close to that. And
well, I was just going to say is 48 taps more than our first location.
Right.
And
we have an interesting relationship between taps and packaged products. And we're general packaged product supporters, but what this really means is we get to just be weird in a totally unique way. We get to have a tap lineup that no one has ever seen before.
I'm guessing we're not ever going to have a total tap takeover of that.
I don't know. I'm not aware of a brewery that makes 52 beers.
Not simultaneously.
Right. That would be pretty awesome, though.
I mean, if they want to sell some kegs for us.
I'm throwing it out there to the breweries. So bring us 52 kegs of different beer, and we're going to have a week-long extravaganza.
I don't know if that's a challenge we really want to do. It'll probably take us months to move all
merely
of those.
Me saying that probably violated the 3-tier system, so I should take it down a notch. Okay, so that's Denton. We're also here to talk today because this is kind of like an update podcast. We're trying to, as we've been opening Denton, as we've had these beta tests, I've really saw, these brand new smiles on people's faces. They walked in and saw games they hadn't seen in so long. And I wanted to talk to you and kind of talk our favorite memories of free play, whether it's been on Tuesday Night Fights or when we first opened or whatnot. So I want to go ahead. I'm going to start while y'all think. And so one of my favorite memories is we were doing a brewery event, and I can't remember what it was for. And we had these... what was the Pac-Man song? What was the soundtrack? Or
Pac-Man Fever?
Pac-Man Fever. There you go.
Fever.
We had signed Pac-Man Fever CDs from the artist of the two that's still alive,
Buckner and Garcia, but not one of them's not.
Right. I can't keep it straight. But we had people playing different challenges, and I announced the challenge on Miss Pac-Man. The first person to score 100,000, which isn't a hard score, but it's a score. Would get this signed CD, and it was starting right then. And at that time, there was a kid, probably 12, currently playing the Miss Pac-Man machine. And I said, if you do it, it counts. And this kid is pretty good at games, but this was a ton of pressure. All these people are lining up behind the kid. There's probably like 25 people around him. And he slowly climbs, and he gets to 40,000. He's losing all of his lives. And everyone, the guy in line behind him is licking his lips. He's so excited. He's going to win this CD. And then this kid pulls this last life off, runs off 60, 70,000 points, hits that 100,000. And like, you could tell it was this really cool moment for this kid. And it was one of my favorite challenges we've ever done, because a lot of time challenges are difficult. Like, if you don't get that score just right, it falls flat. People it's either too easy, too hard. But this was, and normally the first person getting it would be a disappointment, but not this time, because there were so many people, so many skilled gamers behind him ready to play, all with their beer in hand. And there's this 12-year-old, and he just knocks it out of the park. It was so cool. And that, I've got a ton of memories, but let's keep going. Let's see how long.
I can expand on that one too. He won that one. I remember talking to his dad afterwards, because I was one of those salivating people behind him. And, I talked to his dad, and he said that was the first thing he had ever won like that.
So cool.
And so he got to do it like right there with all the pressure on a game he had started before the announcement of the event or the challenge. He went on to continue playing Ms. Pac-Man. It's one of his favorite games. And just this week, he broke my arcade record.
Was that the 500,000
That's Jagger.
score?
That's Jagger.
Oh my gosh.
And that is that same Jagger
amazing.
that won
I had
the
no
CD.
idea.
I promise you, it is.
That's so amazing.
And I talked to his dad
I
Bradley
didn't make
all the
that
time.
connection.
Yes.
That's
So he has a score of nearly 600,000 that he put on Ms. Pac-Man this week in Free Play Richardson.
Yeah, I saw that score, and it made me want to go start playing Miss Pac again, because like that's actually at the far reach of my possible play.
Yeah.
Like I'm in the 400,000s, but that's
a
serious game
of Ms. Pac-Man.
It was so impressive. And now that's the new arcade.
Yeah.
And maybe that challenge set off something, and he was like, this is going to be my game from now on. Because it looked like he was gonna score right around 100, and that's what added the drama. We weren't sure if he was going to get there, and then he pulled it out. So much pressure.
Well, no, and I at that point I had the arcade record then that held all the way until this week. And I had actually talked to Jagger before, and we talked about there aren't distinct patterns, at least in my play of Ms. Pac-Man. I don't think there are. There are grouping mechanisms that you can use, but I showed him like safe spaces, places to hide, things like that as he progressed over the years, and I'm very, very happy to see that he's broken that record.
Cool. It's so cool. All right, so who wants to do a memory now?
There are just so many memories. For me, I would have to say the most recent one was the New Year's party that inspired our Denton location. So for our New Year's party at Richardson, we decided we were going to swap out all of the lights. We put in the bright pink fixtures. We put in these blue lights coming down, had all sorts of specialty cocktails, a balloon drop that was not as successful as the previous year.
There is a YouTube video that's a beautiful video recapping this event, and then about halfway through you see the balloon drop, and static electricity kind of got the best of those balloons.
Man, but we have this video montage playing, and we disappear for a few hours, and we come back, and we've got the pink lights on, and people are filing into the arcade. And I don't know, there's just something about that feel that for the first time, it was like I was seeing free play for the first time again, which was actually a really special thing, because we never got to see free play for the first time. We were so involved in building it that we never actually got to walk in the door and say, we knew it was special, but we never got to just be like, wow. And for me, that was very much the wow factor when it was completely filled with people just partying, having a good time in this magical transformed place that we go to every single day. Just wouldn't take that away.
Well, that playlist was totally unfair. It was designed so hard to destroy your nostalgia zone of your brain that you just couldn't help but reminisce about your past and just be so happy. But it was this. No, that playlist was killer. And obviously, I don't know everyone who's ever operated an arcade, but if there's anyone in the planet that cares as much about theming as we do for our events, I would be shocked, because we go to the absolute. I mean, we want it to be a different experience sometimes, because we have people who come every single week that love free play, and we want to give them a party where it's a little different. Things are separate because they support us, and we can do stuff like that. We can make it kind of new, and that's just the best feeling.
Well, and when we started that, we had no idea that it was even going to work. We decided on a whim to change out all the light bulbs, and we had never seen how it looked because we didn't switch them all and then switch them back just as a test or anything. And it just worked. And I don't know, for me, it was just such a special feeling.
And if you see that video, you can just see all these moments of sheer happiness. And that actually reminds me of one of my favorite moments, which was our first New Year's party. So we had never thrown... Chris, were you there? I can't remember if you made it.
No, I could not make it to the first New Year's party. Although I did put a bounty out on pictures or videos of the balloon drop.
So this was... We had been open not long.
No?
We opened in December 5th.
15th?
We opened December 5th to the public, I think. And December 31st was coming up. And we opened and people were coming. That was, we were like, whoa, people actually want to come. And then we were like, oh, crap. We got to do a New Year's thing. We hadn't even considered
Very much an afterthought.
So we throw together a fast New Year's party. We sell tickets to it and everything sells out. And it was just... I could tell there were people there that were having the time of their life. I could tell that they were going to remember this New Year's party forever. And it took, we did a lot of work trying to get it right. And it was totally amateurish compared to where we're at now. But just the pure joy, there are people in our arcade that are always going to remember certain moments. And that was when I realized that. I realized that we have the opportunity to generate experiences that people will remember forever. That's huge. Sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to cut into your memory. That's fine. Where you at? What you got?
Man, there are so many of them. I spend so much time at the indie arcade, and also so many of them are related to things that I do now in current events. It feels weird even mentioning them.
Your experience is so unique because I'm
at ground zero all the time.
Right. There's no one probably in the world that's had the last few years that you have, because we opened an arcade, which obviously you're big into arcades. You like arcades, and now you work for the arcade,
right?
Doing social events, doing making sure that the community is getting their representation and that we're doing right by the community and running all these special things. And it's just you've had you were spending a ton of time at the arcade before, and then all of a sudden it became your job. So it's either you could tell.
I could fill 70 podcasts with memories, and so many of them have been chronicled through other people, because I do enjoy the social aspect of it. I enjoy sharing things with other people. So I've had accomplishments in the arcade.
Okay,
I'm not interested in that.
Give me a memory that before you were hired. Give me just one that sticks out.
I pulled out I made friends with Michael Beltran here in the arcade early in Free Play's history, and I had the group immediately. So I saw him playing a child, and I like to rub in any kind of way I can embarrass Mike. I'll take that opportunity. So I immediately pulled out my phone, started Facebook Living in our group. And the description of the video says Mike B destroys small child. And he's playing this little girl at Street Fighter, one of the games that he's playing all the time, Super Turbo. And it's first round he wins, second round loses, and then third round comes right down to the end of it, and this little girl, Penelope, beats Mike, and we don't know who she is. We don't know her name. She's just a little girl. And she not only beats Mike with the camera rolling, she just throws the biggest shade look right at him. And before Mike's Sagat character can actually hit the ground, she has already let go of the joystick, spun her head around to say, "Hey, what's up?" And yeah, I had to edit that video and change it to Mike be crushed by small child.
Well, and I want to point out here, this is something we lose. With our glorious Versus City cabinets we just put out, you no longer have that awesome side-by. It's a better playing environment, I agree. But I will always miss the ability to destroy someone right next to you and then look at them. And I mean, I remember that video. That the look she gives him is so good. It's soul-crushing.
Yeah, and honestly, the first video that's posted on the Free Play Arcade official Facebook, the Free Play Richardson official Facebook, is of Matthew, I forget his last name, defeating Chris Conacher in the Vampire Savior tournament, the $100 pot bonus Vampire Savior tournament, and it's like a top 4 match or something like that.
And he's got his whole family around him, his like brother, and they all just start.
They just start holding.
Yeah,
each
he
other,
wins,
like,
and they all jumping up and down, celebrating. And it was, I mean, like
you go from utter defeat because you can even hear him on the video say, "Hey, I lost," and to like win in a matter of seconds.
He's so proud. He's so excited. It's something he'll probably remember forever.
Absolutely.
I remember watching his dad during that because his dad is in the video as well, and his dad is not watching the game. His dad is standing on the opposite side looking at the kids. So he's just sort of parenting the situation, not the game at all. He's not aware of what happened or why it's happened, but they are hugging each other. They're celebrating their victory. The two brothers are, and the dad like calmly comes over to him and has him go and thank his opponent.
Right, they shake. Him and Chris Conacher shake hands out.
And he can like barely control himself. He's so excited, and he's like, "Thank you," and then back to the celebrating and the hugging. It was such a magical moment.
I remember watching that video, and I remember being just kind of like, "Wow, this is just a magic moment." It was so cool, and I mean, as we talk about it, there's just so many. There's so many great times, and then I think back to like when we first opened, and I got because my whole job is totally different than when we first opened Free Play. I used to at night be the bartender. It didn't last that long. We were fortunately able to afford more staff shortly after we opened, but I was there like I remember like Tuesday nights I was a closer. Mm-hmm. I was a closing bartender, and I just think about, like, I'm not a good bartender. That's not what I'm great at. But it was a lot of fun. It was really interesting, and I got to personally meet a lot of the early people. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, I get someone who's just, I was like, hey man, how's it going? Thanks for coming. And I'll see them, and they'll be like, hey, you remember me? And it turns out they're asking if I remember them 2 years or 2.5 mm-hmm. years ago, that time that I was bartending. And of course I have, like, when you're bartending, you're just trying to keep up. You're just, and especially me, I'm just trying to make sure I get the products right to the person as fast as I can. But I think about that time really kind of like as one of those good times that you look back. It was really hard. It was terrible. I'm closing at 11 p.m. and then I got to clean the whole arcade, and it was this ton of work, but it was so rewarding and just one of those things you look back on fondly.
Well, I really think that that's a thing that happens with all of our bar staff, is that they are there. They are the front people for all of these moments, and they get to watch people light up when they come into the arcade. They get to watch these moments of defeat and victory. I mean, there are these spectators for the drama that happens every day in Free Play, and you know, I can understand the nostalgia of just missing that feeling a little bit. Right. It was a lot of fun when we first opened.
Well, and I remember our first spring series, the Mario. When you were talking about, we had 3 bartenders on staff that Sunday, and it was a busy Sunday, and I remember looking up from the Mario thing and seeing all 3 bartenders as far over in the corner so they could see the projection screen, all of them watching. And then I looked around, everyone in the audience is all watching the screen, all watching a Mario Brothers match. And it was 2016. It was 2016, and people are watching Mario Brothers played at a high level. And it was exciting, has permanently sold me, as Mario is one of my favorite tournament games, just because it's so exciting and people get it. And I just think, all of the Mike sitting there just watching, and me being slightly irritated because there's probably a customer there, but everyone's so into it. It's so cool. It's really neat because it doesn't feel at all like it's been 2.5 years. It feels like it's been 10 years since we opened the first location. And it's because there's constant memories, I can hardly remember a time before Free Play because I mean, one, we work 10 hours a day almost every single day, and but it's also just it's created so many positive memories that it's just amazing. Anything else that y'all can really think
I remember
out?
that Mario Brothers tournament from the inside because I was a competitor in that. And I remember one of the bartenders, one of those 3 bartenders who's no longer with us, pointing out somebody who was a jerk at the bar beforehand and saying, go make sure that one loses. And I was like, no problem.
We got it. Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun to have an additional stake in that match where I was going to go defeat somebody who done someone wrong.
Gosh, and I remember the difference between our first city council hearing and our second.
Oh my goodness, that was fun too.
That was because I remember because our first city council hearing, I assumed we'd get the permit. We're just opening an arcade, and it just starts going really crazy. And the very first city councilman, who's no longer with us, Bob Townsend, votes against us. Mm-hmm. And all I thought was, whoa, well, it's really weird how that happened too, because we were signing up for all this work, and there's this I'm like half like, well, I guess we're just not going to be able to open up an arcade because he just said no, and I assumed, and fortunately every other council person behind him voted yes. But it was nerve-wracking. It was rough. It was difficult. I wasn't sure we were going to actually, which is crazy because if I knew how much work was about to come, I probably would have been really happy to not get that permit. But we got the permit. We celebrated. It was awesome. And then, we wanted to change things slightly. We wanted to add some hours. We wanted to add liquor because we didn't technically, we had liquor through the TABC. We didn't have, speaking of TABC, but we didn't have liquor through the city, which is a whole nother thing. So we went back to get it. And it was like,
how long had we been open by this point?
About a year, right?
Yeah, I think we probably filed for it after 7 or 8 months, because I think it happened. The first process started in the summer, and then I think by the fall we were at the city council.
It was enough that I could mobilize people.
Right. Well,
that long in advance.
And that was really great. So now we had people who'd been to Free Play, fans that were talking, and now basically our friends at this point that could say nice things about Free Play, which really went a long way. Bob Townsend's still on the city council. He says he made a huge mistake when he voted no, and he votes yes. We get a unanimous passing. We're held as a good example of a local business, and that's something you work for all the time.
Absolutely.
You want to be a kind of a business that cities want. And it was also around that time we started having people asking where the next one would be, which we announced Arlington not long thereafter, and have been super, super busy ever since.
I remember
Who knew going from 1 to 2.
I remember about that day. There's one other person in the crowd that wasn't, having some sort of issue because you were there representing your business. There was a few people in that city council meeting representing their business interests. There's one person who was a member of the neighborhood. I had never been to a city council meeting. I wanted to support Free Play, so I got as many people as I could. So the Free Play supporters outnumbered the city council. We were just
it was awesome,
mammoth. And you were there in your suit, and you were there, representing your business, basically, being a lawyer. It was the first time any of us had gotten to see you, conducting yourself in that manner.
Right.
We'd all seen you 10 bar and set scores with FP Hart in them, but to see that was cool. To be there with the group was cool. To see the government in action was cool. To have the city council have that reaction and be basically pandering to us because we're all Richardson area voters.
They were like, of course Free Play gets this. They can have whatever they want. They're amazing. It was so cool.
By the end of it, they were just like, it's okay. We've heard enough. We understand.
Right. We're just lining up, going around, making speeches.
And of course, after the process the first time, we were just like, keep going, keep talking.
Right.
Need as much support as possible.
Right. Yeah. They were just and everyone just I think they actually cut. They were like, okay. Is there anyone against this? And no one at this point, no one was. We'd heard some people because when we first did it, we had 43 letters against us. Mm-hmm. It was crazy. People didn't know what we were going to do. They were scared. They just heard arcade and thought, I don't even know. It's some weird den of bad
negative
people.
Connotations.
You wanted to sell 7-year-old pinball players growlers,
right? Something like that. It was really interesting, and we had people at the city council meeting speaking against us, saying that
lots of security issues. How many armed police officers are you going to have on site at all times?
It was actually really gratifying watching all of it though, because we had so many people there saying that our business model was trash, that we were never going to have people come to our arcade.
Everyone said that our business model was trash.
True. It's true. And that's, I mean, yeah, it's
It was
true.
actually mildly discouraging before we got open, when everyone said, you will not...
No, that's not going to work.
This won't work at all. You're going to go out of business. You're going to waste all your time and money.
Right.
You know, what do people know?
I remember, well, I don't know. I remember my mom coming up to me shortly after we opened and her saying, "You were the only one that thought this was going to work." And I was just like, "Thanks, Mom." She was like, "Way to go. Good job." And I was like, "Awesome." So yeah, I mean, just reminiscing about free play is so much fun because so far it's worked. And that's something we have to keep in mind is all of this has happened because, one, everyone at this table is committed to the best arcade experience in the world. And we will do whatever it takes to do it. And that's, as long as we stay focused on that, I think we're going to be okay. It's just, it's interesting because it has changed, right? We opened Arlington. We're a big business of arcades now. I mean, in terms of arcade sizes and stuff like that, I mean, we probably have more retro arcades than anyone. Anytime I say that, I get like 16 comments saying, "I think this person might." I don't know for sure, but we have a ton, guys. We've got hundreds and hundreds out on the floor right now,
and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds
Right.
in warehouses that you don't get to see.
Right? We have warehouses I haven't been into in months that are stuffed full of arcade games.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about a few of those.
Yeah,
now.
I actually just
Thinking about like 6 inches behind this
right.
wall.
Yeah, in this building, we have a ton of arcade games that people would love to play, and we're going to get them out to people. And it's just a constant. I mean, it's amazing, and yeah, it's totally different now, and it is us trying to bring the arcade experience to as many people as possible. Which at first we just thought, hey, we want to bring the arcade experience, and now it's like let's see how many people we can get this to.
Get this to the most people, preserve the best quality. Like, let's do it all, and let's see how far we can take it.
So let's see. I'm trying to think of any other. All the New Year's parties have been. All the parties in general.
All the parties are always awesome. We have the best bands that come out. It makes the space. We do cool events with cool cocktails, giveaways, tournaments. I mean, I really don't know.
Well, I mentioned this before, but having Calling Jack Burton playing the 80s music live in the small arcade, Free Play Richardson is much smaller than Free Play Arlington, and having them play in the arcade on a stage that you built, and I'm playing a guy dressed up as Satan for Halloween in my Arthur Ghosts and Goblins outfit, which was just like hearted boxers and a lance only. Actually playing Ghosts and Goblins with him during all that madness, it was really special.
Well, and just shout out to Calling Jack Burton. They just played our 1 year at Arlington, and they crushed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It was so good. It was amazing. It was so great. And they played extra songs. It looked like they were having a great time. I know I was. I was so impressed by just like, it felt so cool in there during that party. And I mean, we had 400 people in there with us. So it was, that was a real party. That was awesome. That was intense. And it's just, we keep throwing these really memorable events. And like I said earlier, I love seeing that. I love being able to look around and seeing the people who are just so happy. It's a ton of work. We have just done so much, but it's so gratifying. And I was thinking too about how, I was just thinking about those early days when we were like, we still are basically sub everything, but I remember having to cover the kitchen and then being like, oh, this person's getting off, and having to go cover the bar, and then having a game go down and having to go work on a game all in the same day. It was just like, we were open and we were doing whatever it took to stay open, and that we'll never have that again. We will. When we were interviewing some new junior techs lately, and I was seriously telling them that would be I would love to start there. I would love to have that experience coming into free play as a tech, getting trained and just learning about these games would be so nice. Instead of having to be the president of the company. But
I don't know, a few more responsibilities as president.
It is, well, I'd probably feel better if the TABC wasn't doing what it was doing with Denton. It's every time we open up a new one of these, it's pretty stressful. Obviously, Arlington was a difficult open. Denton was going to be the smoothest and easiest open ever until random didn't hold up.
Well, and what we've learned, I think, is that every place that we open is going to have its own challenges, whether it's with the city, with TABC, or with the physical location and landlords themselves. So now that we have done 2, almost 3 arcades, if we are planning on continuing to expand as we continue to make other plans and, increase what we're doing, if we decide to open any more, I'm sure that we'll plan a little bit better every single time.
Well, and shout out to each arcade for its awesome theme. I love I think about that sometimes, how they feel the same but totally different. You're getting the free play quality on all of the games, but the atmospheres are different, and they're both totally unique and totally retro. And then, of course, Denton is totally its own. Because Denton, there's been about 200 people there at beta tests, but is it a Miami Vice downtown styled retro arcade in Denton, Texas?
Also, it is I know we've had this conversation before too. It is just a few blocks away from the first real arcade in my memory, which was the one at the UNT Student Union building.
Right.
Which is a very, very small arcade back in the day that had about 10 games, and I remember 8 of them. And to have most of those games in free play Denton, just a few blocks away, it looks very similar. It
triggers
city,
the nostalgia.
Oh my goodness, it's unbelievable. A very tight space, just like the Student Union building, which is just blocks away. It's surreal.
Yeah, that's
because I haven't lived there in a long, long time.
Everything in Denton is just a little tighter. Every place I go in Denton, that seems to be the feeling, and I'm really, really excited about getting that one open, and I'm sure I can't wait for the grand opening parties, all of that's going to come. And each arcade has its own history. Each arcade has its own regulars that we all know, and it's just and that's what's really great is eventually it all just becomes a community, and that's that is probably the greatest thing, and that's Chris starts this arcade community group, which is now, I'm unaware of an arcade community group that's anywhere close to the size of Free Play Arcade Community Group.
Yeah, I'm unaware either. It's been special. I know people describe it as their cheers right now, which is incredibly flattering to hear.
Well, so we're here talking about our memories, but we know that our friends, the members of the community group, have all shared their own experiences, and it's such a cool place. They just want to be there. Mm-hmm. And some of it was luck, some of it was planning, some of it was skill, and it all came together, and it's just been a wonderful ride. All right, so any memories that I've cut y'all off on? Anything that we're looking for that we haven't mentioned? I can think of tons of things. I can think of tons of things we've kind of opening without a sound system, a partially working sound system, the blowing up our first
of the sound system.
So it was really funny because when we first opened,
phone calls at 10 o'clock at night that Corey has blown the sound system. When we have to come fix it.
First opened, I wasn't so sure exactly what the sound program was going to be like, and now of course I am notorious for how controlling I am of the atmospheric sounds and the music and everything. And we opened with just a tiny little amp with a tiny little thing and it worked pretty good because we had 10 people in there.
Well, right. And I actually think it was a home receiver.
Yeah.
And a couple of free speakers that we had inherited from something.
Yeah, I think we ended up having to buy maybe 2 speakers. We had 2 that were just left over somewhere. We had
4 speakers total, I think, in the entire place.
Yeah, when the arcade we first opened, that was actually, you could hear the music.
It seemed like enough.
And then
it was empty.
Then we got to Saturday and we had our first 100-person crowd, and we learned how deafening of a roar there is just with people in the building. And then, of course, we ended up having to add a ton of air conditioning, and now we have substantial audio equipment. How many speakers do we have in Richardson now?
It's 32.
We opened with 4, and now we're at, I think, 32 speakers.
They're much smaller speakers.
It's true. It's true. It's
100 watts each.
Yeah, we've had a totally interesting sound experience at every arcade building out the sound, and Arlington's still a work in progress. Yeah. But really still, just so awesome. They're all it's so nice talking about free play because it always sounds weird because I can't just sit there and reminisce, but it's so nice to be able to sit down and just think about all of those moments that have been created there. It's just nice. It's neat.
Well, you were mentioning the ACs, and that actually reminded me. Do you remember a month after we go open, our AC went out on a Saturday night.
Right. Well, and this was when we had also much less capacity of AC too.
Well, right. By this point, we had opened, we were testing everything. It was, December, January. So it was still cold outside. We weren't really super worried at this point. And the AC stopped working. And we had 150 people on the floor, and it was 80 something degrees in the arcade.
Right. We had both doors open and it was like 30 degrees outside, but even with it being 30 degrees with a breeze rolling through the arcade, it was 80 plus degrees. Oh, everyone is sweating. We're panicking.
You printed out all those photos of the arcades on fire, right? And we're like, we're sorry, we'll have this fixed tomorrow. Right. We immediately contacted companies. We had people coming out to do things, but people were still there. No one left.
Right.
And it was so surreal to us because they just wanted to play games. And I mean, people were chugging water and, drinking a ton of alcohol. We had people accusing us of doing killing the AC just to sell more drinks.
And in their defense, I think that at the time, that was our highest sales night in terms of alcohol, because like having a cold beer when it was 82 degrees in the arcade was awesome.
Well, it was a terrible night. I mean, looking back on it.
I know, it was hell.
But I mean, you have to say that all of the people who endured that terrible evening at Free Play and didn't leave. They were such good sports about it, and they were so supportive.
Well, yeah,
everyone was just having such a good time.
And yeah, it worked, and it was really fortunate because it was winter, so they could go outside if they needed to cool off.
Well, right,
and there was a way to hide from that terrible heat. And yeah, I ended up making a Facebook post of that and just being like, I know it was really hot. We're getting it work done. We're so sorry.
Well, that was the thing that made us go, nope, we need a ton more AC.
Well, those were brand new ACs when we opened.
They were.
And still had an issue that fast. And it made us realize that, geez, when it gets warm outside, we're in trouble. So we quadrupled the capacity or doubled or tripled it.
Now we have enough AC for a building much larger than ours.
Well, and I remember that summer, early in that summer, after you guys had compensated by quadrupling what you needed, and before we had the diffuser, so we had one vent down the middle line. It was blowing straight down. And at this time, this is right after this first spring series, which people may remember. That was when Super Turbo debuted at Free Play. Mm-hmm. And so Super Turbo was there. It was super popular. I remember seeing Ian, the guy who does Video Game Music Wednesdays and the community group, standing there. It's late May. It's 100 degrees outside already. He's got a hoodie on inside, and he is diligently playing Super Turbo, shivering.
He's hot. Well, yeah, because that's kind of funny too, because our AC contractor that was installing those AC units just disappears. Mm-hmm. Like, they get them all installed and they disappear before putting on the little...
We hadn't paid them either, so it was very strange that they just disappeared.
It was so bizarre. And so we didn't have an immediate solution, and there's a whole complicated process to actually do those dumb diffusers. And so everyone was like, what do we do? I'm like, just crank them. And so, you could go stand under a 5-ton or 10-ton AC unit just pouring cold air on you.
I just remember his dedication. During the summer, he comes with a hoodie, so he knows it's going to be an issue, and he's prepared. He's going to play that game anyway.
And that was the best part about the early Free Play experience was I would apologize for things, and people would be like, man, don't worry about it. Thank you. And I'm just like, now we've set the standard so high. Anytime something minor goes wrong and I say sorry, they're like, y'all can do better. And I'm like, all right, we can do better. We're going to work harder. It's just amazing how, it's the whole world's changed since Free Play's been open, because now the expectations are so high. Mm-hmm. And that's on us because we are the ones who set the expectations. But it's I think it's fair. I'm happy with them. People expecting the single greatest arcade experience ever every single time they come to us, because that's our goal, and that's what we can aim for. But gosh, it took us like 6, 7, 8 months to get those diffusers fixed, because it was a lot more complicated, because we had to run the big pipe, we had to cut holes. Mm-hmm. It was a whole thing. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, that's part of just like the transition of Free Play from just us opening an arcade and getting people in there to having to learn how to do every single thing associated with Free Play.
I remember staying... I would go to Free Play even as a customer almost every day, And I remember being in there in some weird situations, including a tornado warning.
Oh man,
hit Rowlett, I think.
Well, it was so a serious tornado.
I was in the building too.
It's Rockwell Rowlett, and it didn't even look too bad outside. And then out of nowhere, it just looked terrible and scary outside. This is the tornado that destroyed a ton of houses. I mean, they were doing fundraisers. We helped raise money. I mean, it was a huge thing, and we get these tornado warnings, and Richard and I were both there, and I look at Richard, and he was just like, what do we do?
What do we do?
And I was like, and then people started coming up to us. They're like, what's going on? What should we do? And we were like, well, guys, the safest place is probably the restrooms.
Right.
Well, we had a real debate.
Well, there's
what do we do with the games?
Right.
We've got all of these glass windows at the front, and people aren't listening to us because they're so engrossed in the video games that they're playing. So what do we do? Do we leave the games on? Do we turn them off? Do we tell everyone to go to their restroom?
Well, yeah, so what we ended up doing is turning up the lights all the way, turning down the music, and just saying, people, go to the restrooms. It's the safest place. And then it hadn't even fully passed, and then people started coming out of the restrooms because the games, they were like, all right, I'm just going to play games.
Well, and it was great because at this point, I mean, all the hail starts, and we've got this big giant window, and everyone of course lines up right in front of the window to stare at the massive amount of hail that's just pouring down and piling up in the parking lot.
I mean, it destroyed houses, destroyed a part of a highway. I mean, it was a terrible storm.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I also remember like standing in the line when that happened and hearing every one of the phones go off in succession, beep 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 beep, as everybody is tuned in.
And we definitely had a spike of beer sales of Brown that time too. People were like, "Oh man, I gotta go sit in the restroom. I gotta get a beer. I'm gonna run and grab my beer and then sit in the restroom." And then, I mean, fortunately, it didn't hit us. But yeah, that was a major storm, and we haven't had anything quite like that since.
No, I mean,
not at all. We've had some serious weather, but nothing at all like that. It was part of learning, I guess.
No.
We've had power outages that. This might surprise the listeners, but when an arcade has a power outage, that people generally aren't happy because the main product has disappeared from the screen. And we've really had to deal with that in Arlington a lot.
We have had some very adamant customers, though, that were perfectly willing to wait around and, just continue drinking their beers while they waited for the power to come back on. Well, that's always
the thing is, we could be like, guys, our beers will be cold for another 2 or 3 hours, so we're just going to ride this out and see how it goes. It normally comes back pretty quickly. Arlington, I guess we found out recently that all of our Arlington power outages were caused because the Arlington power, just the way the distribution is working in downtown Arlington, is not very good.
Right.
So they've been, in theory,
they're replacing a bunch of our transformers right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we know our neighbors, Jake Gilligan's have had issues, Cool Keg, some of the restaurants. I mean, it's an ongoing issue in Arlington, but that's been fixed. And it's always fun now because I get a phone call and it's like, hey, all of our power's out. And and it's kind of like, how long has it been out? When do you think it's going to come back? And I'm, it's part of that learning experience running this kind of arcade.
I just like the encore notifications that tell us that the power is out, but it will be up in a couple of hours. We call over to the location and they're like, everything's fine. Right. We don't know what's going on.
Speaking of air conditioning, we got a comment the other day because I was like, really sorry about the power, but don't worry. We'll get the ACs running as soon as possible. And then this person comments, they're like, I came in after the power had been out for 2 hours and it was way too cold in there. How does it still so cold? And I was like, we try to keep things pretty cool. But yeah, so I mean, I love reminiscing about free play. We could talk all day.
Oh, probably.
But we're about out of time. We're about ready to wrap up. Any last second you know what? I now have a good idea. If we ever need extra podcasts, we can just come here and just talk about how awesome free play is. Denton will be open as soon as the TABC lets us open it. We think it's all pretty much done. We've spoken to the TABC. We've spoken to everyone. We think it's all happening. It's just taking a little bit of time.
24 hours of charity on NBA hang time.
That was great. I remember at 4 a.m. That was awesome. 24
hours with Lauren as she broke the Tapper world record.
Absolutely.
24 hours of Super Turbo with the greatest players I had ever seen at that point. I'm trying to think if there's any other like overnight stays in the arcade, but anytime like one of those special events happens. Oh, and I remember having Mark Turmel actually like message us during the 24-hour run to give us well wishes.
Right.
So That's a special memory.
Well, and
Those are
at
special memories
the
to me.
same time, like the two 24-hour charity things, raising thousands of dollars for sick kids. I mean, how cool is that? Like, geez, all right, we're going to get off on a whole thing. Until next time, we're wrapping up the Free Play podcast. Denton will be open soon. We are in the secret lab, new podcast beta test thing. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.